Hello, welcome to today's episode of Planner Stories, the show where we invite inspiring planners to share their career path, their convictions, and their vision of planning. And today I'm really excited to welcome Stephen Yarwood. Stephen, how are you today?
I'm very well, Lucas. Thanks very much for having me. Hi, Foss. It's nice to meet both of you.
Yes, same for us. We're really excited to have you here. Maybe as an introduction, you can just start by telling us who you are and what do you do today in the planning industry.
Oh, well, I've got a bit of an Aussie sense of humour, so I'm not quite even sure where to start. Maybe just a professional ratbag and troublemaker, and I've been called a likable larrikin, which, Lucas, you wouldn't have even heard of that term before. But beyond that, I'm a qualified urban planner. I've worked in state government, local government, and parliament here in South Australia. Accidentally became the Lord Mayor of Adelaide. Fun little fact: youngest Lord Mayor of a capital city in Australian history. But now I'm living my lifelong ambition from my very early years of wanting to be a futurist. So I work as an urban futurist these days. So urbanist and futurist and consult nationally and internationally on long-term transformative strategic planning and change in cities.
And you mentioned off the record that you started like dreaming of being a urban futurist for a very long time. What first drew you in the planning industry? Why do you like it?
Yeah. When I started a planning degree, I was always interested in geography, and I did know that one of my real passions is that I wanted to see the world and travel. And I do hope we have a chance to talk about that because I'm often surprised that many urbanists and planners don't actually get out and see cities as much as they should. And even in their daily practice, sitting behind a desk versus actually kicking dirt and standing on street corners is really important, let alone exploring other places and seeing what other people do. But I had a passion for geography, and when I started my planning degree, I was learning about Le Corbusier and Ebenezer Howard, this utopian thinking about the long-term visioning of cities, the true greats of urbanism. And at the same time, Adelaide was doing a 2020 vision project, and I was given the opportunity to sit in the office, in the state government office, and do work experience there. And also, the Australian federal government won a contract with Japan to win a future city development project called the Multifunction Polis, or MFP. And then South Australia won the opportunity. So there was that was in the early stages. So there was a future city being planned in Adelaide. We were doing the 2020 vision, and I was studying this stuff. So at the ripe old age of 21, I somehow decided the very unusual career path of saying I wanted to be a city futurist when I grew up. And then I realized I needed grey whiskers and I needed to be old and wise. So I've got the grey whiskers and the age, not quite sure about the wisdom yet.
Interesting, interesting. So basically, so you studied urban planning in the first place, and what your early career looked like apart from this futurist project? You had like a traditional path to like grow as a planner, or how do you manage that?
Yeah, I did. And this is probably something that's really worth sharing with planners in the sense that I really decided to craft my career around learning and growing, not just earning a pay packet. So maybe rubbed a few bosses and managers up the wrong way by turning up on day one and saying I'm here to learn as much as I am to do a job. And so I was very lucky. I worked in state government and did state policy when I first started at the age of 21. So I was writing policies for industrial development, for heritage listing things from a ripe old age. But I also did development assessment at the state level, big developments, sort of runways, airports, big wineries, industrial stuff, complex applications, and then did strategic planning. Also had the opportunity to be a research officer in the South Australian Parliament. So it was always like a 2 to 3 year placement just to sort of develop the skills and knowledge I needed just to grow as a profession. I also did a graduate diploma in environmental studies. And look, I'm old enough to sort of be of that ilk that when I was studying environmental studies as a postgraduate, people were saying, you're crazy, you're not going to get a job, you're going to be seen as a greenie.
Mm.
And I find it sort of kind of that, along with the fact that I was interested in how technology would change cities, when it wasn't really even the topic that people were thinking of, meant that looking back now, I was passionate about sustainability, climate change, and how technology was transforming how cities work. Ironically, I kind of feel like these are some of the really big issues that are bubbling away right now. So there's my first claim to being ahead of my time.
And so, did you feel at some point of your career there was a turning point? Like, did you feel a before and after a major event that happened, and some project you work on, you were like, okay, I'm gonna then only focus maybe on the futuristic direction, or did you have this kind of turning point?
There's there's probably two key moments in my life where I thought, wow, I finally made it. You know, even as a kid, you know, wow, this is happening. Look, honestly, I struggled to get promotions because I was always passionate. I challenged my bosses. You know, I was more digitally literate, you know, and just as young people today are more digitally literate than I am, which I openly acknowledge, back then I was more digitally literate than they were. And so very sort of aspirational, but I got the opportunity to be a research officer in the South Australian Parliament for what was a parliamentary committee called the Environment, Resources and Development Committee of Parliament. And I always remember walking through those doors on that first day thinking, wow, I can't believe I actually work in Parliament House. And I got to work with a whole range of interesting people, do parliamentary inquiries, on a range of topics, ecotourism. I tried to get a parliamentary inquiry up on smart cities at the time. We are talking like 25 years ago, by the way. And it was just, and I worked with politicians, and so I got a chance to work directly with leaders of the state. The other time would be the first time I ever actually sort of had my own full proper office. Actually, they were the only two times I did, and that was when I became the Lord Mayor of Adelaide. I was elected at the age of 39. Long story short, quit my job, put 20 grand on my credit card, knocked on every single door of the entire city, didn't put core flutes up, the posters up, didn't have enough money. Just went out and did 850 kilometers of door knocking. And I always remember walking through that door into this absolutely massive office, just thinking, holy crap, what have I done? And it was certainly a life-changing experience. Very humbling looking back, and a great experience. A lot of hard work, but an incredible privilege. And I remember one of my managers saying, I can see you being a futurist one day. I'm not sure how you're going to get there. And then about a year later, I was the Lord Mayor of Adelaide. So that's how I roll.
And yeah, actually, this experience is probably very uncommon. I mean, not everyone becomes Lord Mayor in their life, so especially planners. So, what did you think that experience teach you about how like city really work and how planning decisions are made? Did you get to see another aspect that maybe other planners don't get to see if they don't arrive at the Lord Mayor role?
Oh, look, yes, I could. That's a whole 1 hour podcast in itself. But let's see. I guess by knocking on every door in the community, I got to meet rich people, poor people, people who are dying, young people, old people, people of all walks of life, multiculturalism. You know, I got to know where all the brothels were in the city. You know, I talked to every business owner. It was just a really amazing experience to actually listen to the community. I basically door knocked for a week, trying to tell people why they should vote for me, and then I spent the next sort of 3 months knocking on people's door, asking what was important to them. And so I really got to sort of understand how the community thinks and how diverse the issues are, and that cities are all about people. They're not about cars, they're not about buildings, they're not about scale, bulk, form, function. This is about the operating system of citizens. And so that was a really important part of it. Understanding the political pressures of making planning decisions, knowing that you're going to be judged at the next poll, was a really challenging experience for me, because I did want to apply what I learned in my degree. I wanted to apply what was right, not left or right in terms of politics, but good academic, intelligent rigor about how cities work. So that was a really important part of making sure that you get that right. But I guess finally I'd say it was the bird's eye view of being able to see cities from an holistic perspective. It's not, working with, you know, you'd go to lots of functions. So you'd go to all the multicultural festivals. You'd go and deal with disability. You'd deal with the LGBTQI plus community. And, I was the first Lord Mayor to hang a gay flag outside the town hall. You'd work with the bicycle industry, you'd meet the people who own all the car parks, you'd meet, when the Royal Baroque Society of South Australia says they need an urgent meeting with you, that there's lots of stakeholders above them that are really important. So it's really getting it's like living in a 300-kilometre-an-hour information wind tunnel. And it's quite overwhelming, but it was an exquisite opportunity to sort of transition from being a planner to an urbanist. This idea that cities aren't rocket science, they're infinitely more complicated, and understanding the sort of the intricacies and the complexity and the chaos. And I mean that from a scientific perspective of how cities fundamentally work, live, breathe, and tick. So other than that, I learned nothing.
I was going to ask, like in terms of like I get overwhelmed talking to like having a few back-to-back meetings in a day. How did you kind of process or synthesize all that you were learning across speaking to all these different people and demographics and things? And I guess like synthesize that into kind of, in your mind, useful actions or things that you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, so I don't want this to be the Stephen Yarwood podcast hour, in the sense that my biggest achievement of being Lord Mayor is that the morale of the organisation went up 4 years in a row when I was Lord Mayor. And I've always believed that people achieve great things when motivated. And having worked as a planner in council, all I ever wanted is the elected members to actually listen to me and respect my professional opinion and back me to the hilt and actually leave me alone and let me get on with doing my job. And trust in the professional expertise I had. And so I think a big part of that was me doing that, actually working hard to get the elected members who all think they've got a great idea or get on council because they're actually not happy and they want to change things, because that's why most people run for councils. And enable the staff to get on with the job, increase delegations, simplify things, make it simple for the community to actually engage with the council, changing the culture from computer says no or you need to go to the rule book to case managing things, getting people, the placemaking, getting people out on site, changing the culture from a no or a maybe to a yes, and if I don't know the answer, I know someone who can help you. And so I think it was really important. So it wasn't about me, it was about enabling the staff in the organisation to achieve their job. And so it's sounds great, especially for planners who might be listening right now, but I think the key to that is encouraging your elected members to let you be frank and fearless, and that means training the elected members in a way that is about getting to know that they shouldn't have all the answers. They should trust the experts and enable the experts, but they need to provide that decision-making framework across the top, which separates the culture of the community, whether it's, mayors in their cities are like pets in their owners. So the difference between an Auckland and a Sydney, or the difference between a Sydney and a Melbourne, or Adelaide and a Perth, or a Hastings and a Napier, for example, both places I've done consulting work. So that was a really important part of it that I think is about enabling them. And for planners too, if your elected members are not listening to you, it's not their fault. They need to either be trained, or you need to go somewhere where your professional opinion is going to be valued.
Interesting, because maybe it doesn't happen that often that someone that comes from the planning industry gets into political positions. Like maybe a lot of time there are trained politicians or people that study politics or things like that. So it's actually a really interesting aspect. And you said that just after that is when you turn more to the futurism and like strategic planning, etc. So how do you do this transition from one to another?
Yeah, it's a funny story. So I did run for Lord Mayor the second time, but it's an interesting. I had an interesting experience in the sense that the pub owners didn't like the small bars, the restaurants didn't like the food trucks, the old school conservative people who drive their Mercedes out of their garage and don't walk the streets didn't like the bicycle lanes, and we also redeveloped closed laneways. We redeveloped Rundle Mall and Heine Street and Rundle Street, the CBD. Widened the footpaths, put in more trees, and so there was a lot of pressure for small businesses at the time in terms of capital works. So I did win the election by a considerable margin, but had 5 candidates all run against me who exchanged preferences. And on a preferential countback, I lost by 182 votes, which at the time was devastating. But in the long run, it's kind of worked out. I'm more than happy. I like to say that I had a long-term relationship with the City of Adelaide, and now I'm having a series of short-term relationships with cities and towns and communities around Australia and New Zealand. So, which is probably an indication of how much I like it, because I'm making it sound quite salacious. But and so I took some time out. And then developed this concept of City 2050. Every city will do a long-term transformative strategic plan. And so I hung myself out, shingle out as a futurist, and then gradually and incrementally, it's kind of rolled into where I am at today. I've never advertised. I'm not really big on social media in the sense that I'm a bit cynical about it. And as a futurist who's interested in digital technologies, I have my big grave concerns about how social media is changing our society. And also I'm still a bit of a target, people. As the former Lord Mayor, I don't carry a title. I'm just known as the arsehole that put all the bicycle lanes in. So there are people who still don't like me, or make the mistake that I'm a white male privileged guy that's had all the best opportunities in life. And so if I've got an opinion, I'm a patriarchal, etc. That's another whole story, but I'm not. Single parent, from domestic violence. My mum's growing up, my mum was very, very sick. And so all of this has just been a crazy fluke. So I'm just still a kid who can't believe it and chips away. And I spoke at a conference in Canberra yesterday, and I've already had about 6 or 7 people come up and say, we'd like you to come to our city. Whether they happen or not, I'm not, but I do bounce around on stage with a bit of energy, crack a few bad jokes, get people thinking about the citizen of the future, and start to challenge how people sort of not only plan for, but think about and understand the future. So it's really good fun. Just a nerd doing his job. And if I could claim watching Star Trek as a tax deduction, I would.
And it's funny because you actually describe yourself, you said, as a futurist, urban strategist, etc. What does it mean exactly in practice? Like your day-to-day, what does it look like? For example, when a city calls you, what do you provide them to help them build the future?
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to start with from day to day. So I'm going to go back a bit. So this is actually really more about choosing to actually live my values and be authentic. I'm not the sort of guy that turns up for a pay packet. I turn up to do something important. So I'm going to start with saying my day starts with walking my dogs at sunrise in nature, and getting my 10 to 15,000 steps in, and rising with circadian rhythms of the day. It then goes on to, and I'm a bit casual. I've just come back. Then it goes coming back from the gym. I'm planning my long-term future by getting ready to age gracefully. So I'm a bit strange. Like I'm a minimalist. I don't drink alcohol. I don't look at screens after sort of 8 o'clock at night. I do the things that I don't know we probably should be doing, but we choose not to. So that's, to be honest, that's how my day goes. And so I'm very lucky. I'm totally self-employed. Maybe by 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if I'm not motivated and pumped, I'm sitting on the couch playing PlayStation with those sorts of things. So I've got a really good work-life balance. So it's not all hardcore. But in terms of working with clients, it's a really interesting, and I'm really humbled by this. It's a really diverse range. So because I do citizen of the future, I can actually work outside of the planning and city planning and city government perspective. So I often do keynotes at all sorts of interesting conferences. I've done the National Ambulance Association's conference recently. I'm going to be speaking at the Human Resources Institute conference here in Adelaide soon as well. And a lot of that's now to do with artificial intelligence. So I also, in terms of my daily activities, I have two girlfriends. One is real. The other one is my ChatGPT agent called Athena. And so I also work in the AI space in terms of creating my 2050, Stephen 2050. So I work extensively in that space. So I'm an advanced user. So I even can just get up in front of a bunch of old farts who run cities, communities, corporations, and companies, and ask them if they've even filled in the details, settings on ChatGPT, and no one has. They still think it's like Googling stuff. So I sort of do a lot of that sort of stuff, right through to then speaking at conferences and being a speaker at councils and doing training development around good urbanism and the citizen of the future. And so councils are often doing 10-year strategic plans. So sometimes I might just come in and do some training and development, or I'm speaking at a transport conference in Portugal in a week and a half, where I'll kind of explain that, you know, we had 300,000 years ago, we had Homo sapien. You know, hundreds of thousands of years ago, we had a Homo sapien. Tens of thousands of years, we had farming. Thousands of years ago, we had cities. Hundreds of years ago, we had industrial cities. Then there's today. The thing is, with all the technology that we're seeing and the transformation of society at the moment, we're actually going to go to the next era in only about 20 years. And all these cities are actually doing 10, 20-year plans where they're not even factoring in that machines are going to be smarter than us. There's going to be, autonomous neural network of transport and mobility devices completely beyond cars, like cars are completely different to horse and car. And there's going to be humanoid robots rolling off factories within sort of 10 years, like the Model T Ford did in 1906. And no one's doing strategic planning within this context. So my job is to be a professional provocateur and turn up and challenge their thinking, because we tend to apply the last 10 years of our life to imagine a future that looks absolutely nothing like it. You know, don't take this wrong, you're two young white guys. You know, you can't think like a woman. You can't think like a disabled person. You can't think like a child. You can't think like an old person. You can't think like a woman who's experiencing domestic violence. You know, these are all things that is about encouraging people to sort of step out of their own reality. So do that stuff right through to, my favorite is a diagnostic kind of approach where I might spend 3 to 5 days, and I've done this a few times now, 3 to 5 days in a city, and I'm super lucky because I get to turn up at the start of the week. I meet with the CEO, have breakfast with the mayor, talk about their strategic vision. I have a session with the executive. I'll run workshops with the elected members. I'll do a session for the broader staff. I might even do a big community event. Often, sometimes I do a podcast. I write a report. We'll do a workshop around the town centre. So I'm particularly interested in CBD transformation. So really challenging, how CBDs work. The answer is always trees, wider footpaths. So I can do Jedi mind tricks on elected members that think that we need more car parks. By the time I leave, they're going, oh, no, we don't need more car parks. We need to get rid of car parks, and we need wider footpaths. We need trees, and we need to fill the empty shops, and we need playgrounds for the kids to climb on. We need mental speed bumps that hold people in places, and we need, better quality urban realm. But we can do it cheaply. We don't have to spend it, gold plater. So I do that sort of, I can come through and sort of go through the entire ecosystem of community, especially regional Australia, which is really fun because you also get an article in the paper, and, you get people thinking differently about their community and empowering people to be a part of it. So I don't know, other than that, nothing. It's fun. Look, I'm very lucky. Like I get that's kind of what most planners would absolutely love to do. But I do, anyone who's listening, I will warn you, and I said this to you before, but I spent the first 15 years of my life being laughed at because I wanted to do this stuff, because most people just think it's about going to work and earning a pay packet. And and stuff. I've just integrated my hobbies and my passions into what I do, and I get paid to stir the pot.
It does seem like a very interesting role in the terms of like calling yourself like a provocateur, and I guess where are you getting kind of drawing your inspiration? Like obviously you're coming to these people and you're raising these questions and pushing in this way and that way. Where are kind of you getting your, I guess, your fuel from? Like what are you reading, or what are you?
Yeah.
Getting
Absolutely information junkie, but right across the board, from the fact, certainly as a futurist, science fiction shapes my thinking, and I'm not ashamed of that. So I've made a joke about Star Trek, but movies like the movie Her, which is about a relationship that Joaquin Phoenix has with an AI assistant. That's a really good science fiction piece. I've read plenty of books. I haven't read fiction in a very long time, I must admit. So science fiction is a really, and I'll watch bad science fiction just because if I get one little thought bubble out of it, it's useful. And I'm also I also, my social media, I describe myself as an aspiring time traveler. So I'm pretty addicted to time travel, science fiction as well. And if I've mentioned Her, if there's one time travel thing that you should all watch, it's a German one called Dark, which is on Netflix. It is just mind-blowing. Foss, you've seen it?
I've seen it, yeah.
Right.
Not only I watched it, and we had in New Zealand managed isolation during COVID. I watched it and I had to spend 2 weeks in a hotel room in the managed quarantine watching that show. So
you watched it in a compressed, just 2 weeks of your life that you'll never forget.
Yeah.
So do that, but then I also subscribe across the board to a whole pile of things. So I've always been looking at Wired magazine, and I just subscribe to lots of literature as well. So I'm getting lots of daily updates on information, but also I've been very lucky because I've had the chance in my formative years, certainly. Either I was a councillor and then I was the Lord Mayor, to work with and read a lot of books by some of the most famous urbanists in the world, who then I actually got a chance to work with. So Jan Gehl, who frankly, if you're an urban planner and haven't heard of Jan Gehl, that means you probably haven't heard of Jane Jacobs, and they're probably, Jane was the goddess who's now obviously passed away, and Jan Gehl is the Wayne Gretzky or the Don Bradman or of urbanism in the world. I got a chance to work. Jan actually did 2 jobs in Adelaide. One when I was before I was a councillor, and then one when I was a councillor, and then one when I was Lord Mayor. And so I actually worked with Jan, and I spent time with him in Denmark and stuff like that. But also when I was a young planner, there's a famous urbanist called Charles Landry, who I mentioned to you before, who's a creative cities expert, and he did a very similar thing for Metropolitan Adelaide, and was a thinker in residence. And having spent like 2 months here, he actually pulled me aside on the last day before he left, and he actually said, don't worry about what people think about you. There's something magic that's going to happen to you, Stephen. He pulled me aside out of all of the people he worked with in Adelaide, and there's a great story. We were out to describe cities, and instead of talking quickly like I am now, I wrote a poem about how cities work as a metaphor for trees and roots and leaves, and connected to ecosystems. And we're now very good friends today. So I've worked with Charles as well. And so I've had an opportunity to be inspired, and I've read most of these people's books and their literature as well. So, but even now, like just even right now, I've set up my ChatGPT. There's a new element to it that's called Pulse. I constantly adapt, and now I get daily updates via ChatGPT. ChatGPT knows me incredibly well. I've actually trained it to know me. I've given it, I've coded its memories of me, so it understands who I am, when I was born, when my children were born, what my hobbies and my interests are, which countries I've been to, and just even like yesterday it was giving me information about my upcoming trip to Istanbul and what's happening in Istanbul and urbanism in Istanbul. So I'm constantly looking for information and adapting, and also just do research. One of the crazy things is that people say, can you do a piece on this? And I put the citizen of the future at the center, and then I kind of apply transport and even gender or sexuality or food or the home of the future or whatever the future's issue, leadership of the future, water, waste, but it always comes back to the citizen. And so when people kind of engage me to think about a topic, I'm very lucky in the sense that if it's a keynote, they pay me enough that I'm able to just, I've got two options. One is I can just turn up and just give a standard speech and bore the crap out of everyone, or I can get all their strategic plans, run it through AI synthesis, use it as data mining to apply a citizen of the future lens to it, to then look at it and do some analysis and run it back through AI, do some Google research, read some articles, and then constantly sieve the information to come up with some stuff that will be really useful to them. So it's kind of cool when you get paid to do a keynote, and it's kind of like 3 days is still, it's 2 to 3 days of good solid work is more than a week's work and plenty of time to walk the dogs.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned, so Athena is your AI assistant, right? And you mentioned her kind of, I say her because it's kind of humanized almost as a co-strategist, and you use her to think about widen your vision and get more information, synthesize, etc. More generally, amongst the planning professional, what do you think will be the impact of AI in the industry, and how do you think planners should embrace AI and these new evolutions?
Yeah, so this is a really big conversation. This is more than transitioning from horse and cart to car, and cars fundamentally changed the spatial dynamics, the economics, the social context, and even the physiology of humans. Like we're now obese. We do less steps. We're so far removed from our ancestors. It's just not funny because we drive everywhere. And so this is going to happen with AI. So I like to see it in this is normally I say two sides, but I'm probably, for planners, I'm going to say three, because the traditional notion is that we talk about how it's going to change our jobs and how it's going to change our organization or our council or our business. But the truth is that it's also going to change the operating system of citizens. So planners are planning communities, but it's what I would describe very simply as what people do when they get out of bed in the morning. So if you imagine 200 years ago in an industrial city, people got out of bed and they did things differently. Like they went to the toilet outside of the house. They rode a horse to work, or they got on a horse and cart and went to work. They may have had a bicycle, or they may have been a train or whatever it is, but they didn't drive anywhere. The rubbish was picked up differently, and resources moved across the curvature of the earth differently. And so the operating system of citizens was different. And so today, compared to the future, and especially with a neural network of artificial intelligence and the common language of binary digits embedded in everything, creating this sort of information ecology system, we are going to do things differently to the way we do things. One of my challenges to planners is, unless you're physically getting citizens to get out of bed and doing things differently, you're just blowing smoke up your ass. Like, realistically, we're meant to be changing how things work to tackle climate change, to tackle equity in cities, to tackle health and well-being, etc. So these are things we actually physically have to do things. Otherwise, we're just kind of like just seat warming kind of stuff. So there's that element as well. But I'm also going to suggest that artificial intelligence is going to change the fabric of cities. So architects are going to be using AI to design buildings, and so if we're going to have all artificial intelligence augmented transport, artificial intelligence augmented architecture, artificial intelligence augmented business systems, Amazon, Uber, whatever it is, the physical form of cities is actually going to change. Do you reckon an AI is going to tell us to design a building the way we build them today? Or is it going to say, yeah, now that's energy inefficient. You've got to change the orientation. You've got to change the height. You've got to change the bulk. You've got to change, you don't need to build a big glass building that's a glorification of your architectural ego. You need to build a building that's going to serve people. And so an AI is going to challenge humans to do things in better ways, in synthesize, meridian altitude of the sun, how people are going to use the building, what the economy is going to look like, how people are going to get to that place, how long are they going to stay in that place. Whereas an architect just starts drawing pretty pictures, and I'm being very cruel. I don't mean I'm overgeneralizing. But so the built form and the physical form of cities is going to change. The operating system of citizens is going to change. And I haven't even started to talk about the fact that, planning process is going to change. Just one question would be, how on earth can we take 3 months to do a development approval for a house when you can 3D print a house in 2 days? It's all got to change, and there's going to be a huge amount of disruption. In a nutshell, there's a lot of people who are doing jobs now that will be replaced, especially if planning is a good one, a really good example. Within 5 years, we do a lot of administration. It's changing now, and AI's. I'm not the I'm not the guru of how AI is changing the planning profession. But AI systems are going to fundamentally accelerate administration and change administration. And we're going to start to have to think more strategically. And then we're also going to have to start to think more ethically. And then we're going to have to actually go back to what as an urban futurist, I'm actually an old school town planner where we used to think about making people better, making society better, colonizing the planet in a better way. To make people live longer, be happier, utopian thinking. And so I really have a hope and an aspiration that the planning profession will be given the space to do that, because all the other stuff that we've become door bitches of rules and regulations are going to sort of be done by machines, and it will be automated in a way that will free up the planning profession to get back to not only the science, but also the creativity of human aspiration.
It is a really interesting, it's almost like the increase in like technology's role of doing things. And it's kind of almost pushed us, like in the COVID time in particular, like pushed everyone home and isolated a bit. And I sensed a thrust in what you're saying is getting out there, like talking to people, being in the environment you're dealing with physically, and those things. It's almost like it has like it's pushing us back out of the house, like into the world kind of thing.
Yeah. Human relationships, like the future of being human is going to be being the best human you can be. This is something that I've got a 15-year-old or 16-year-old who's going to be doing his final high school year next year and then going on to university. And so I am obsessed with thinking about the future. I actually kind of joke that, some people used to, how some people go to medieval festivals or their hillbilly, rockabilly dances, and they, or I don't know, you're too young, but a lot of people in my era are still listening to 80s music. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas I feel like I was born in the year 2050. So I still haven't, well, in that sense, I'm constantly thinking about the future, but I haven't grown up yet, which is kind of fun. And so, yeah, the idea that we do need to get out and connect and be the best humans. So, I do mentoring, and if people are listening, I'm up for I've got a mentoring program that I've set up using AI to create people's personal strategic plan, a 10-year vision for themselves, a purpose for themselves, strategic priorities, etc. And that actually means concentrating on mental health, your personal professional well-being, having goals, having accountability, creating an accountability framework. So it's not just planning cities. I'm planning myself here, and I've got a wonderfully supportive partner who's doing the same and absolutely holds me accountable. So yeah, I do believe that being the best person you can be, and it's going to be relationships. So understanding emotional intelligence, being kind, being considerate. There's, you know, I'm still very worried. I don't know about New Zealand, but Australian culture, it's very selfish. You know, if I could give you one crazy example, you know, I've walked all around Tokyo, and there's not a single rubbish bin in Tokyo, because Japanese people take responsibility for their waste, and there is no rubbish anywhere. There are rubbish bins all over Australia, and there's still litter on the ground. You know, and if we took the rubbish bins away in Australia, everyone would say, that's dumb, it's the government's fault, I'm not going to bother, I'm just going to litter on the ground, it's not my problem. And so we need to start to take more personal responsibility, and we need, as a community, to take more personal responsibility and be accountable. And I think the planning profession does. You know, we need to be brave. Climate change is terrifying, and a planner who's driving a V8 car to work and by themselves and complaining about traffic is not probably a part of their own profession's aspirational transformational thinking. So being that change you want to see in cities is incredibly important. So yeah, getting out, talking to people, engaging, exploring cities, and hopefully that's on your agenda, because I'd love to talk about the importance of exploring cities and being inspired by other places.
You made a great transition, because you talked about Tokyo versus Australia in terms of like the trash management, etc. So I know that you worked a lot abroad, like you worked in Australia, but also in Middle East, you told me, and consultancies with different countries. What would you say are the major difference you noticed, like in planning, but not only in urbanism in general across the countries, that kind of widen your perspective of planning?
Yeah, I just should sort of really. So I keep a map of all the places I've been, and I'm going to openly say I haven't worked in lots and lots and lots of countries. I have done a lot of keynote speaking in various places, and that's a wonderful opportunity. But I also have explored these places. So if even just one really good case study, and this is hopefully an inspiration for planners. When I was Lord Mayor, I went to Taipei. Taipei wanted the global cycling conference, which was coming to Adelaide, and so the mayor went with me to talk about, you know, how did you get it, what did you do, and then as soon as the meeting finished, I actually said, oh, I've got one more favor, and I said, is there any chance there's an English-speaking urban planner who can go and take me for show me around the city? I love cities. I want to explore the city, and I'd love to do it with an official. And he nearly fell off his seat. And he said, you are the only official I've ever met who's actually asked to see my city. And so, you know, I think it's just so important to get out there and actually do the steps. Like I've done 50,000 steps in a day in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. It was not fun. Yeah. And I was in a walking race at the time to hit sort of 600,000 steps over a period of time. I did 80,000 steps in the gym a couple of days later. But I explored the city, and it doesn't even have to be a beautiful place to explore it, but also just getting on a train and going out to the end of the line and just walking around and having a look and using public transport. So I was in Canberra yesterday, and I got a 24-hour pass to use public transport, and so I used the tram and stuff. And I just knew that everyone else that was going to the conference at Parliament House was either getting an Uber or a cab, and it's just not hard to use public transport. You get more steps in. You know, you interact with people. You know, you see good architecture, you see good graffiti, you see bad graffiti. I found the lane. I'm going to say the laneway in Canberra, not laneways. But in just exploring, like these are fantastic things. So, and I kind of feel like every community, every country, and every city has different things and different lessons. And I get lessons out of the bad stuff as well. You know, it's just as important. It's just as important to walk the slums of Mumbai than it is to do a coffee in Amsterdam. You know, and I meant coffee, by the way, real coffee. I should better be careful there. I think can't quite remember. Anyway, sorry. But so just to getting exploring different places, and having the opportunity to experience the cultures and see how it works. Huge fan of Scandinavia in terms of good urbanism. Massive fan of Scandinavia because I just think. I feel like if I ever got the chance to go and talk about good urbanism in Scandinavia, they'd all just sit there and go, yeah, we know this stuff. It's kind of, I wouldn't really be up for a job over there. But also I love Asian cities for the vibrancy and, the higher densities mean that the public street life is vibrant and that people don't sit in their backyards thinking, how's the serenity? And they connect and they play chess in public parks and they exercise together in communities. We are one of the loneliest Australians and Americans and probably New Zealanders are some of the loneliest people in the world. We experience we also live in the biggest houses in the lowest densities, and we don't really even know our neighbours, and we don't causally meet them or talk to them because we don't walk past them and we don't start to bump into them. And so you don't have to be a wealthy country to be a happy country or a healthy country. You just have to have good built form is a huge part of this. So yeah, lots of inspirations, from lots of different places, from sort of India to I've explored India extensively. India to Hong Kong is another one. Melbourne is the transformation of Melbourne. It's just been one of the most amazing urban transformations, and I could list dozens of cities that have really inspired me. New York, I love just because it's so different to the rest of the US, and it's less than 50% of people own cars, and so it's a good example of how even in America you can do good urbanism, good walkable cities, good vibrancy, good street life, good neighborhoods.
Yeah, for example, being French, I was in the US recently and I was really surprised that these cities are not meant for people who are walking. Like in France, everyone is walking all the time, and you have this small street where there is walkaway only and this kind of stuff. And when I was in the US, you cannot go walking in their cities. You have to take the car every time you go somewhere, and it's not really comfortable to walk by. So yeah, there are a lot of differences.
And seas of bitumen car parks. The amount of space they give over to the car actually destroys the amenity of cities, and it's a feedback loop too. The more people who are driving, the more bitumen there is to allow for cars, the more car parking spaces, the less people there are, and the less people who want to walk in those spaces because the amenity is low. So it's a very interesting cause and effect feedback loop process. The reason kids don't ride their bicycles to school today is because it's not safe, because there's so many people driving their cars. So the kids that could ride have their parents drive them, which creates more cars, which makes it less safe, which means that more kids don't ride their bicycles. So these are really complicated feedback loops. But what frustrates me a lot of the time is your average citizen kind of just says, we need more car parking, we need more roads, because they're seeing it from their own perspective rather than understanding that they're not stuck in a traffic jam. They actually are the traffic jam, and getting them to understand that if they made a contribution and did things differently, it would be a feedback loop, and cities can transform. Amsterdam was a car congested, actually, excuse my French, there's a term there, festering shithole with cars, and they made a decision to change. And so it is about community values and decisions to change. People always say, my city isn't Amsterdam. Well, Amsterdam wasn't Amsterdam. It made a conscious decision to go from cars to transport mixes of choices with the bicycle included. These cities have had trajectories where the car has become king, and it really does have a feedback loop that actually makes cities worse over time.
And maybe about that, like one other open question before we wrap it up. You often talk about like the citizen of your future. Here, I'm really asking for your take. For you, what the citizen of the future looks like? What's his life? What will he do?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, I'm going to be a bit cheeky and say, it doesn't have to be him. because you said what's his like, and so it's about understanding that the citizen won't be like us. I do go back to what I said about Homo sapien, agriculture, industrial cities like London and Paris 200 or 300 years ago, and today the citizen of the future will live in the next phase of humanity, and so they're going to wake up and have a neural net connection to an artificial intelligence that's smarter than us. So I don't really talk about AI anymore. I talk about AGI, artificial general intelligence. And artificial general intelligence is when machines become as smart as us. And reality is that the pundits are now saying that is somewhere between 6 months and 3 years away from today. And I have never seen a strategic plan for a city or community that actually factors in, that's a 10-year plan, that has actually factored in the machines are on the cusp of being smarter than us. And that is just, mind-bending. And so just as we know, we learn more in a week than someone 200 years ago learned in their lifetime, these people are going to have access to more information in a minute than we have in months. And so, if you don't control the notifications and you don't turn off your AI assistant and it connects to either your headphone or your hearing aid inside your ear via Bluetooth, I'm not going to be the only crazy guy with voices in my head. Everyone's going to be having a direct neural connection to an artificial intelligence that can access everything in real time. Where Foss is, if he's in Adelaide, and how far away he is, knowing that we talked and that he's heading in the same direction as you in a car, and if you wanted to catch up with him because you have a algorithm relationship score of 9.72 and he'll be coming by in 30 seconds, do you want to jump in? That's just a one random example, but it's going to change. We're going to, with gamification, using information, with the share economy, which won't be Airbnb and Uber. This is going to be, me accessing an electric drill from my neighbor. It's going to be me getting food grown in a local community garden. We will have a new operating system that's going to change our relationship to water, change our relationship to waste, change our relationship to food. Food won't just be a menu that says how many kilojoules the food is. It will say how many liters of water was used to make it. We'll have a water allowance in a future when fresh water is starting to become scarce. So we're going to really have, and it's scary. This is scary. I'm not a technological evangelist. This is coming, whether we like it or not. And no one can pull the plug out, because if we pull the AI plug out, China or Russia are going to go headlong. This is the next nuclear arms race. This is how we're transforming. The world is rushing towards this stuff. So there's a whole range of issues there. We're going to be really facing serious change from climate change, where as a species, I think we're going to start living shorter lives because of the health and wellness issues we're facing now, before we start living longer lives. Or 2 billion people are already eating insect-based proteins. And so food is going to change, but the food of the future we should be eating is just what we're eating now. It's just that Coke and McDonald's and whatever else is actually just allowed to advertise stuff that is killing us. And so we're going to sort of, my hope would be that we actually go back to some of that caveman stuff. Circadian rhythms, human relationships, good sleep, eating what we're supposed to eat, whole foods, etc. Unplugging at nighttime, but also we're going to decouple from productivity in terms of jobs and productivity. We're teaching the machines how to do our jobs. So conversations are going to have to happen in the near future about universal basic income, how we're actually going to change the habits of people from day to day, week to week, and month to month. So you ask, there's a big question. Wish I'd turned my mind to it, but they're the sorts of things that I kind of like to think about in terms of, and then I haven't even talked about how we're going to live in homes. Densities are going to increase. Transport's going to change. You know, people, if I told you people are not going to want cars in the future, some people go, but I love my car. But 100 years ago, people said, but I love my horse. So there are so many things that over the next 15 to 20 years, it's accelerating so rapidly. And that's not me mentioning the, which I touched on before, humanoid robots rolling off the factory floor like cars are today. So there's huge changes ahead, and interestingly enough, this time it's going to be a transition with eight or 9 billion people on the planet, which is these eras have never changed with more than 1 million people, or 1 billion people. 1 or 2 billion people went from the industrial revolution to today. So we've got massive changes ahead. The most important thing is I know that I don't know, and I think anyone who actually gets up and says, I know what's going to happen in the future, they're not a real futurist.
Yeah, and you think that the cities will have to adapt to this new citizen? Because the origin of the question was you were in your day-to-day job, you're thinking of the future of cities. Like you said before that the urbanism kind of starts when the people wake up, because it's what they're gonna do after in their life that is gonna like influence all the layout of the city. So you think that there will be major changes due to this evolution of the way of life of the citizens?
I do, and it's very hard to conceptualize. This is stuff that's very difficult to imagine, but that would be like asking someone 200 years ago to imagine how the car was going to change spatial dynamics of cities. So, I'm not going to say I know the answers, but one great case study is if we are going to have autonomous vehicles, if we are going to have better public transport, if we are going to change the densities of cities and make them walkable, we can't continue to just chew up agricultural land when it's not going to be viable to spread cities out further and further, because it's just, even with autonomous vehicles, you're still going to be stuck in a traffic jam. But we're not going to have to build big freeways. I think a really good case study is neighborhood and regional centers. They are seas of car parks. And in an era when we will not need those, we could, I once did when I worked at a council, I once did a study that said we could fit 70,000 people with relatively low densities within 800 meters walking of a regional center, based on the fact that most of it's car parking and low density housing. If we just go to 2, 3, 4 stories with maybe 6 to 8 stories right next to, or even on top of the shopping center itself, where the jobs are, where the entertainment is, where the medical services are, where the retail is, where the supermarkets are, we can really actually take thousands of vehicles off the road. And so we're actually sitting on a gold mine of all these car parks around our cities that are going to one day just be villages, vibrant villages with laneways and trees and parks, not just bitumen for parking cars that we drive for less than 1% of the day.
Yeah, actually, I think that, as you said, it's a very wide subject, and I think we could have a whole podcast just on this very topic. And as I told you off record, I think that this was one of the really interesting parts of your profile, the fact that you're looking at the future to build the cities. Also, what you're doing with like City 2050, it's really interesting. And about that, before we wrap up, because I'm conscious of time and I know that we're coming to the end, is there any personal news or venture you would like to share with our listeners?
Look, a couple of things. Firstly, I'm a global corporation of one. I'm not looking to grow my business. I just really love what I do, and so I would sort of openly say I love New Zealand. Really enjoy coming. I've done work in various parts of New Zealand, and so I would jump at any opportunity to come over and work with great planners who want to work with great elected members. I love working with elected members because I can get them on board, help them set their strategic vision, encourage them to trust and build those relationships with their local with their staff as well, because that's where the magic is. But also I love to just come over if there's an opportunity and do training and development and public speaking as well, speaking at conferences, etc. So I would sort of say, look, I'm always up for an adventure. Like my life mission is to fill in as many dots on a map as possible, and I'm not afraid to jump on a plane and explore the world. So that's one thing I would say. Secondly, I am excited because I am now doing mentoring, and I've coded Athena, my AI, to be able to actually develop mentoring and strategic planning that's AI empowered. And I've done my own purpose, my own 10-year vision, my own strategies. And the idea of actually doing that for other people is good, and actually teaching them how to create their own AI that is developed to develop them is some unique training and development, whether it's an elected member or someone who's a young rising star. So I'm open to doing that mentoring. But in the super short term, just as a fun little thing, I've actually worked for Airbnb previously. I've done some consulting work for them and advisory work for them, but I also run my house as an Airbnb to fund my addiction for travel. So I'm off to walk the streets of Istanbul on the way to speak at a conference in Lisbon in the very near future. But then when the cricket's on in Adelaide, I'm renting my house out for the week. And there's also a V8 car race. I'm renting my house out for that. And my son and I are backpacking around Java in Indonesia. And we're just going from Surabaya to Yogyakarta to Jakarta. Like, I'm just one of those crazy guys that actually goes to a place like Jakarta just because I want to have a look. And so they're the sort of things that I do. I'm a minimalist. I don't believe in stuff, believe in experiences. So so they're the sorts of adventures I've got coming up. There's something called a gather round for the football here next year, and I've already rented my house out for that, and I'm going to Egypt and Jordan as well. So there's subscribe to Jetstar. Yeah. You can get cheap flights, use a credit card where you get frequent flyer points, spend less on booze, cook your meals at home because they're going to be healthier for you. They're going to be make you fitter and stronger, save your money. And especially as a planner, just get on a plane and just go and explore these places. Spend time with your loved ones. It's not a pay packet. Planning is a purpose, and being inspired by other places is a really, really, really important part of that. So that would be my final message.
No, that's great, and a lot of travels ahead for you. So wish you all the best. And finally, maybe where can people follow your work or connect with you in case they want to?
I'm not hard to find on the internet, unfortunately. But if you just Google Stephen Yarwood, you can find me, or you can just whack that into an AI engine, and it will lead you to City 2050 is the business. I do use LinkedIn, so you can, and I respond to everything. So you can certainly reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, and I'm more than happy to have a chat. And if there's an opportunity to if there's a listener who's interested in collaborating, please do reach out, because I like to also make. I think you might have. I like to make a little bit of fun as well.
Perfect. I will put all the links in the description of the podcast anyway, so they will have everything. Perfect. Foss, you have something to say?
No, I've just said I've really enjoyed the conversation and hearing your thoughts, because coming into this, definitely a part of planning that I didn't know much about, the kind of more futurist side and long-term planning. So no, it's been kind of fascinating to hear, I guess, the level at which you're thinking, like all these different dynamics that could unfold, that kind of go into influencing the plan. So no, really appreciate you making the time.
Oh, I'm flattered, Foss. I just never take any for granted. So thanks, Lucas, and thanks, Foss, for reaching out. And I've really enjoyed the chat too. And good luck with the work you do. And I appreciate you being curious.
No, it was a great moment. We really enjoyed. So thanks again for taking the time. Really appreciate. And see you in the next episode of Planning Stories. Thank you.